The night she decided to run, Pandora realized the most dangerous thing about her marriage wasn't the bruises. It was how close it came to killing her hope. She boarded the plane desperate to disappear, unaware the man beside her had survived centuries of blood, darkness, and vengeance. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Pandora had always believed love was supposed to hurt. Not in the dramatic, tragic romance way novels tried to sell, but in the quiet, exhausting way that wore you down piece by piece until pain felt normal and silence felt safer than speaking. Marriage had taught her that lesson thoroughly. From the outside, her life looked enviable. 29 years old, living in a sleek high-rise overlooking downtown Chicago, married to a man people admired. Marcus Hale was polished, articulate, and respected. He wore expensive suits and knew exactly when to smile, when to place a guiding hand on the small of her back, when to call her my wife, in a voice warm enough to melt suspicion. But walls heard the truth. Behind closed doors, Marcus was something else entirely. His charm rotted quickly in private, revealing a man who needed control the way others needed air. It started small, almost invisible. Comments about how she dressed. Suggestions about which friends were bad influences. Jokes that landed too sharply but were always followed by, "Relax, I'm kidding." Pandora learned early that disagreeing wasn't worth the effort. She learned how to soften her voice, how to choose words carefully, how to apologize even when she wasn't sure what she'd done wrong. She learned to anticipate moods, to sense the tension in a room the way sailors sense a storm. The first time he shoved her, he cried afterward. The first time he slapped her, he bought flowers. The first time he punched the wall beside her head, he blamed work stress. And the first time he hit her hard enough to knock her down, he told her it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't provoked him. Pandora believed him. Or maybe she just wanted to. The beatings didn't come every day. That would have made it easier to leave. Instead, they came sporadically, unpredictably, like earthquakes, long stretches of calm followed by sudden devastation. Just enough tenderness in between to make her doubt her own memory. Until the Tuesday night, everything finally ended. It was an ordinary evening, which somehow made it worse. Rain streaked the windows, the city humming below like nothing in the world was wrong. Pandora reheated dinner for the third time, glancing at the clock with a familiar knot in her stomach. Marcus was late again. No message, no explanation. When he finally walked in, the smell of whiskey hit her before his voice did. He loosened his tie slowly, eyes cold, jaw tight. "This is burnt," he said, lifting the lid on the plate she'd made. "I can make another," she started. "You're useless." The words were calm, controlled, almost bored. The slap came so fast, she didn't have time to react. Then another. The force sent her stumbling backward, her shoulder hitting the counter hard enough to steal her breath. When he shoved her, she fell, the world tilting violently as her head struck the floor. For a moment, everything went silent. She tasted blood and metal. Her ears rang. Above her, Marcus was still talking, complaining, accusing, justifying, but his voice sounded far away, like it was underwater. Something inside Pandora cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, completely. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, noticing absurd details. A faint crack near the light fixture, the hum of the refrigerator, the way her chest rose and fell too fast. Marcus eventually stormed out of the apartment, the door slamming so hard the walls shook. Pandora didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stayed on the floor until her body stopped shaking, until the adrenaline burned out, until the pain sharpened into something clear and undeniable. Then she stood. Her legs felt unsteady as she walked to the bedroom. She stopped in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. Bruised cheek, split lip, finger-shaped marks already darkening her arm. Her eyes, though, they were different. They weren't empty anymore. "I'm done," she whispered to her reflection. She packed one suitcase. Clothes, documents, her passport. Nothing sentimental. Nothing that tied her to this place. She left her wedding ring on the nightstand. No note. No explanations. No second chances. She booked the earliest international flight, leaving O'Hare. She didn't care where it went, only that it was far, far from the man who had almost erased her. The airport felt unreal, like stepping into another dimension where life continued uninterrupted. Bright lights, rolling suitcases, people laughing, arguing, living. Pandora moved through it all like a ghost, hoodie pulled low, sunglasses hiding the damage she couldn't. Her heart didn't stop racing until she was finally seated. 21B. The plane smelled like recycled air and coffee. As she buckled her seatbelt, exhaustion crashed over her in waves. For the first time in years, no one knew where she was. No one could reach her. She was free. Then someone sat beside her. Pandora noticed him immediately, too immediately. He didn't fumble with his bag or glance around uncertainly like most passengers. He moved with effortless confidence, tall frame folding into the seat with practiced ease. He looked young, mid-20s, maybe, but there was something about him that felt old. Not tired, experienced. Like he'd seen things most people never would. Broad shoulders, sharp jaw, dark hair neatly styled. His skin was pale but warm-toned, flawless in a way that didn't seem real. He wore black tailored pants and a deep red shirt that clung to him just enough to be distracting. A long black coat rested over his arm, elegant and completely impractical for a flight. Pandora thought, despite herself, of course. I escape my abusive husband and end up next to a fashion model. Then another thought slipped in, uninvited. He looks like a vampire. She almost laughed at herself. Trauma did strange things to the brain. The man turned slightly, catching her staring. His eyes met hers, deep red-brown, intense but not cruel. Curious. Rough day, he asked. His voice was smooth, accented faintly, though she couldn't place where from. Pandora snorted softly. You could say that. He smiled slowly, the kind of smile that suggested secrets. I'm Luca, he said. And before you ask, no, I'm not a serial killer. She laughed, really laughed. The sound startled her. It felt rusty and used. I'm Pandora, she replied. And statistically speaking, that was comforting. As the plane began to taxi, turbulence rocked the cabin slightly. Pandora's fingers tightened around the armrest. First time flying? Luca asked. No, she said dryly. Just not a fan of dying violently. He chuckled. Unfortunate. That's my least favorite way to die too. She raised an eyebrow. You have a favorite? Several, he said smoothly. But that's third date conversation. Despite everything, despite the bruises, the fear, the life she'd left behind, Pandora smiled. What she didn't know was that Luca hadn't planned on sitting beside her. He rarely flew commercial, rarely blended in, rarely cared. But the moment she boarded the plane, something ancient inside him had stirred. He could smell fear, pain, fresh bruises layered over old scars. And beneath it all, strength. She wasn't running toward something. She was running from someone. And Luca had always despised men like that. Somewhere over the Midwest, as the plane lifted into the night sky, Pandora leaned her head back and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Safety. And if you were in her place, bruised, exhausted, finally free, would you trust the quiet comfort of a stranger, or would fear still whisper that peace never lasts? The plane leveled out somewhere above the clouds, the cabin lights dimming as the city lights below disappeared into darkness. Pandora hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her body until the seatbelt sign turned off and her shoulders finally sagged. She exhaled slowly. Beside her, Luca noticed. He noticed everything. The way her breathing eased by fractions, like she was afraid even relaxation might be punished. The way she kept her arms close to her body, guarding invisible wounds. The way she flinched when a flight attendant's cart rattled past too loudly. Centuries had sharpened Luca's senses far beyond the physical. He could hear her heartbeat, too fast, uneven. He could smell the fading adrenaline clinging to her skin, layered beneath the faint metallic tang of blood and antiseptic. Fresh bruises, old fear, abuse left a signature. Luca had learned that long ago. Pandora shifted in her seat, glancing at him. So, she said, trying for casual and landing somewhere near fragile humor. Do you always tell strangers you're not a serial killer? Or am I special? He smiled, one corner of his mouth lifting. Only when they look like they're deciding whether to scream. I wasn't deciding, she said. I was evaluating. Practical. She nodded solemnly. Very. A beat passed. Silence. but not the uncomfortable kind. Pandora found herself oddly grateful for it. Luca didn't pry, didn't ask invasive questions masked as concern. He just existed beside her, calm and steady, like someone who wasn't in a hurry to define her pain. It was nice. The flight attendant stopped by, offering drinks. Pandora declined automatically, habit drilled into her. Luca ordered a glass of red wine. When the attendant handed it to him, Pandora paused. "You drink that on a plane?" He glanced at the glass, amused. "I've had it in worse places." "Like where?" she asked before she could stop herself. He considered her for a moment, eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Let's just say altitude doesn't bother me." She snorted softly. "You're very mysterious." "Occupational hazard." "What do you do?" she asked. Luca took a slow sip of the wine, gaze never leaving hers. "I invest." "In what?" "People's bad decisions," he said smoothly. Pandora laughed again, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "So I've been told." The cabin grew quieter as passengers settled in. Some slept. Some watched movies. Pandora stared out the window at the endless dark, her thoughts drifting despite herself. "Are you visiting or leaving?" Luca asked gently. She hesitated. Old instincts screamed not to answer. But something about his tone, curious, not demanding, lowered her guard. "Leaving," she said finally. "Good," he replied. She turned to him, surprised. "You don't even know why." "I don't need to," Lucas said. "Most people don't leave unless staying hurts more." The words hit harder than she expected. Pandora swallowed. "Yeah," she murmured. It did. He didn't push further, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Anger flickered through him, controlled, ancient, dangerous. Somewhere in Chicago, a man who hurt women continued to breathe. Luca rarely interfered anymore. He'd learned restraint the hard way. But some lines, once crossed, never stopped calling. Pandora shifted again, wincing slightly. Luca noticed immediately. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She stiffened. "I'm fine." He raised an eyebrow. "Pandora." She sighed, defeated. "I don't mean to be rude, but I don't really." "I'm not asking to fix it," he said calmly. "I'm asking because pretending doesn't make pain disappear. It just teaches it to wait." Her throat tightened. She stared at her lap. "I fell," she said automatically. Luca didn't challenge the lie. He simply nodded. "I see." The plane jolted lightly, turbulence rippling through the cabin. Pandora's hand flew to the armrest again. Without thinking, Luca covered it with his own. His skin was warm. Too warm. She froze, breath hitching. Old reflexes screamed, "Don't draw attention, don't upset him." Then she realized, Luca wasn't gripping her. He wasn't holding tight. His touch was light, grounding, offering rather than claiming. "You're safe," he said quietly. She didn't know why those words undid her. Tears welled before she could stop them. Pandora turned her face away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't usually." "It's all right," Lucas said. "Truly." She wiped her eyes, laughing weakly. "I swear I'm not this dramatic." He smiled softly. "You're human." Something about the way he said it made her glance at him again. His expression was unreadable now, eyes darker than before. "Where are you headed?" she asked, changing the subject. "New York," he replied. "For business." "Of course," she said. "Where else do mysterious investors live?" "Somewhere between penthouses and shadows." She studied him openly now, curiosity overtaking fear. "You always dress like that?" "Red and black?" he asked. "Yeah. They remind me who I am," he said simply. "And who's that?" He met her gaze. "Someone who doesn't forget." The answer sent a shiver through her, not fear exactly, but intrigue. Time passed differently after that. Conversation ebbed and flowed naturally, light moments threaded through heavier silences. Luca told her strange, half-true stories about places he'd lived. Pandora talked about nothing and everything. Books she loved, coffee she hated, the small habits she'd developed to survive. She didn't mention Marcus. Not by name. But Luca heard him anyway, between the lines. Midway through the flight, Pandora excused herself to the restroom. The mirror there was unforgiving under fluorescent lights. She studied the bruises again, anger simmering beneath the exhaustion. "He doesn't own me anymore," she told herself. When she returned, Luca was watching the aisle intently. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," he said slowly. "Just thinking. Dangerous hobby." He smirked. "Extremely." As the hours stretched on, Pandora found herself growing sleepy, eyelids heavy. She fought it at first, embarrassed by the idea of falling asleep next to a stranger. But Luca noticed. "You should rest," he said. "I don't sleep well," she admitted. "I won't let anything happen," he replied quietly. Something in his certainty made resistance feel unnecessary. Pandora drifted off. She dreamed of running, through rain, through darkness. But this time, someone walked beside her, unhurried, unafraid. When she stirred awake, the plane was descending. Her head had fallen against Luca's shoulder. She jerked upright immediately. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." He chuckled softly. "You didn't snore. That's not reassuring." "You drooled a little." She gasped. "You're lying." "Am I?" His eyes danced with mischief. She laughed, mortified and oddly lighter than she'd felt in years. As the plane touched down in New York, Pandora felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. She didn't want this moment, this fragile bubble, to end. They stood in the aisle, waiting to disembark. "Well," she said, shifting her bag, "this is probably where we go our separate ways." Luca studied her for a long moment. "Perhaps." "Thanks," she added, "for being decent." "Anytime," he replied, "though I suspect we haven't seen the last of each other." She smiled politely, assuming he meant it figuratively. She was wrong. As Pandora stepped into the terminal, unaware she was being followed, not by Luca, but by something far more dangerous, Luca's expression hardened. Somewhere behind them, a man who believed he still owned her had begun to search. And Luca, vampire or not, did not share what he considered his responsibility. If you were finally free after years of fear, would you trust that freedom enough to believe it couldn't be taken from you again? The first thing Pandora noticed about New York was the noise. It wasn't just loud, it was alive. Car horns layered over voices, footsteps, music leaking from storefronts, sirens crying somewhere in the distance. The city didn't pause to breathe the way Chicago sometimes did at night. It surged forward relentlessly, daring anyone to keep up. Pandora liked that. She stepped out of the terminal with her suitcase rolling behind her, the cold air biting at her cheeks. For the first time since boarding the plane, reality settled in fully. She had no plan, no apartment, no job, no one waiting for her. And yet, instead of panic, she felt something dangerously close to excitement. Behind her, unseen by most, Luca followed at a careful distance. He wasn't stalking her. Not exactly. Vampires had rules. His rules, etched in blood and regret. He didn't interfere with human lives unless absolutely necessary. He didn't impose, didn't claim, but he observed. And right now, every instinct he possessed told him Pandora wasn't as free as she believed. The scent of danger lingered faintly on her. Not immediate, but approaching, like thunder before a storm. Pandora hailed a cab and slid into the back seat, giving the driver the address of a modest hotel she'd booked hastily during a layover. As the cab pulled away, she leaned her forehead against the window, watching the city blur past. She should have felt guilty, broken, ashamed. Instead, she felt light. Her phone buzzed in her bag. Her heart slammed painfully into her ribs. For a terrifying second, she thought it was Marcus. Her hands shook as she pulled it out. Unknown number. She hesitated, then let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a text appeared. "Where are you?" The air left her lungs. Her fingers hovered over the screen, then curled into a fist. She powered the phone off completely, tossing it back into her bag as if it had burned her. "No," she whispered. "Not anymore." Across the street, Luca stopped walking. He felt it. The spike of her fear, sharp and sudden. His jaw tightened. He didn't need supernatural insight to know what had happened. The past had reached for her. Again. Pandora's hotel room was small but clean. Neutral colors. Safe locks. She double-checked the door before collapsing onto the bed, shoes still on. She stared at the ceiling, listening to her own breathing. She was really here. She was really gone. Tears slid silently down her temples. Not from sadness this time, but from release. From survival. She didn't know how long she lay there before sleep finally claimed her. Luca didn't sleep. He stood at the edge of the rooftop across from her hotel, coat billowing slightly in the wind, eyes trained on her darkened window. The city pulsed beneath him, unaware of the predator watching from above. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A message from one of his security teams. Hale is making calls. Private investigator. Aggressive. He believes she fled to New York. Luca's grip tightened. Marcus Hale had crossed from nuisance into threat. That was unacceptable. Pandora woke to sunlight streaming through thin curtains. For a moment, confusion washed over her. Then memory snapped into place, and she smiled. She showered, wincing slightly as water hit tender bruises, then dressed in jeans and a sweater. She tied her hair back, studying herself in the mirror. Still bruised, still tired, but standing. She stepped outside, deciding to explore. She walked with no destination, letting the city carry her. Coffee shops, bookstores, street vendors, laughter, life. She stopped at a cafe and ordered a latte she couldn't afford but wanted anyway. Bold choice, a familiar voice said behind her. She turned, startled. Lucas stood there, hands in his coat pockets, red shirt vivid against the muted tones of the cafe. You, she blurted. He smiled. Disappointed? No, just surprised, she said, heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. New York is smaller than it pretends to be, he said. Mind if I join you? She hesitated only a second. Sure. They sat by the window, steam rising between them. So, she said, stirring her drink. Are you following me? Lightly, he replied honestly. She laughed. That's unsettling. Fair. Why? She asked. He met her gaze. Because people don't usually run without someone chasing them. Her smile faded. You're perceptive, she said quietly. I've had practice. She studied him, then sighed. I left my husband. I know. Her eyes snapped up. How? You wear it, he said gently. Not on your skin. In how you move. Pandora swallowed. He's not supposed to find me. Luca's voice hardened. Has he tried? She nodded. Already. Silence fell between them. If he comes, Luca said calmly, he won't touch you again. She scoffed softly. You don't know him. I don't need to. Something in his tone sent a chill down her spine. You talk like violence is easy for you, she said. For some things, he replied, it is. They finished their coffee in quieter conversation. He made her laugh again, dry humor, sharp wit. It felt dangerously good to feel normal. As they parted outside, Pandora hesitated. Luca. Yes. Thank you. For not treating me like I'm broken. He smiled softly. You're not. She watched him walk away, unaware of the shadows bending subtly around him. That night, Marcus Hale stood in a private investigator's office, rage barely contained. She's here, he snapped. I know she is. We'll find her, the investigator said. She's not as invisible as she thinks. Marcus smiled coldly. Neither of them noticed the security camera flicker, just for a second, as something ancient watched back. Pandora lay in bed later, staring at her phone, powered back on now, but silent. She thought of Luca, of his calm, his certainty. She didn't know what he was, but she knew one thing. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't asking her to endure pain quietly. If the past came knocking, would she finally stand her ground, or would she need a monster to do it for her? Pandora learned quickly that New York rewarded movement. The city didn't ask who you were or where you'd come from. It didn't care what you'd survived. It only noticed whether you kept going. So she did. She walked miles each day, learning neighborhoods by instinct rather than maps, letting her body relearn what it meant to exist without permission. Her bruises faded slowly, yellow replacing purple, tenderness dulling into memory. The deeper wounds, the ones no mirror could show, took longer. She avoided familiar routines, changed cafes, took different subway lines. She told herself it was caution, not fear. Some nights, though, she woke sweating, convinced she'd heard Marcus's voice slicing through the dark. Those were the nights Luca appeared. Not dramatically, not climbing walls or emerging from shadows like some gothic fantasy. He would simply be there, across the street, leaning against a lamppost, in the corner of a bookstore, sitting at the opposite end of a nearly empty bar. Always red and black, always watching, never intruding unless she invited him closer. At first, she told herself it was coincidence. By the fourth time, she stopped lying. You're really bad at pretending you're not following me, she said one evening, stepping outside a grocery store to find him waiting. Luca glanced up from his phone, unbothered. I'm excellent at pretending. You're excellent at noticing. She crossed her arms. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you, he said mildly. I'm trying to keep you alive. Her chest tightened. You don't get to say things like that. I do, he replied, eyes steady. Because it's true. They walked together without deciding to. The streetlights painted gold halos on the pavement, the city humming softly around them. Why me? Pandora asked suddenly. You don't even know me. I know enough, Lucas said. She stopped walking. He stopped too. No, she said. You don't. You know the version of me that flinches and jokes and pretends she's fine. You don't know how stupid I was. How long I stayed. How many times I told myself it wasn't that bad. Luca turned fully toward her. Staying doesn't make you stupid, he said quietly. It makes you hopeful. Those are not the same thing. Tears burned her eyes. She looked away, furious at herself. You sound like someone who's seen this before, she muttered. I have. How many times? Too many. They resumed walking. Pandora studied him more openly now. The way people unconsciously gave him space on crowded sidewalks. The way he never seemed tired, never shivered in the cold. The way his gaze tracked everything at once. You're not normal, she said. He smiled faintly. Neither are you. I'm serious. So am I. She stopped again. Luca, what are you? The city noise seemed to fade. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, if I tell you, you won't believe me. Try me. He searched her face, something like hesitation flickering across his features. Another time, he said finally. When you're not already carrying so much. She should have been frustrated. Instead, she felt oddly relieved. Marcus Hale hated uncertainty. It gnawed at him, burrowed under his skin. Pandora's disappearance wasn't just an insult. It was a threat to the carefully controlled narrative of his life. A wife didn't just leave. Not without consequences. The private investigator's report lay open on his desk. Sightings. Credit card traces. A hotel. A cafe. New York. Marcus smiled thinly. He booked a flight that night. Pandora found temporary work at a small independent bookstore in Brooklyn. The owner didn't ask many questions. She liked Pandora's quiet competence, her way with customers, her reverence for stories. People who love books usually survive something, the woman said casually during her first shift. Pandora smiled, unsure whether to agree. She felt almost normal shelving novels, recommending paperbacks, laughing softly with strangers. It felt dangerous, this happiness. Fragile. Luca visited once, pretending to browse. You don't strike me as a romance reader, Pandora said, watching him pick up a dog-eared paperback. Tragedy is repetitive, he replied. Romance at least pretends there's hope. She tilted her head. Pretends. Sometimes, he said. Sometimes it delivers. Their eyes met. She looked away first. Later that night, as they walked together again, Pandora spoke without looking at him. If my husband finds me. He won't, Lucas said. You don't know that. I do. Her voice trembled. And if you're wrong? Lucas stopped under a streetlight. The glow caught his eyes, turning them almost unnaturally bright. Then I will end him. The words were calm. Certain. Pandora felt a chill ripple through her. You can't just, she started. I can, he interrupted softly. And I will. She searched his face for exaggeration. There was none. Violence isn't the answer, she said weakly. Sometimes, Luca replied. It's the only language men like him understand. She turned away, shaken. Halfway down the block, she stopped. Luca. Yes. If you're this dangerous, she asked quietly, why haven't you hurt me? Something softened in his expression, something old and sad. Because, he said, I choose who I become. The night Marcus arrived in New York, the air changed. Luca felt it immediately. A disturbance, sharp and invasive, like rock cutting through clean water. He stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, coat snapping in the wind, eyes narrowing. You're closer than you think, he murmured. Pandora, unaware, locked up the bookstore and headed home alone, humming softly to herself. She never saw the figure step out of the shadows behind her. Not until a hand grabbed her arm. She gasped, heart slamming into panic. Miss me, Marcus hissed in her ear. The world tilted violently. Before she could scream, before fear could take over completely, the streetlights flickered. And somewhere above them, something ancient smiled. If you were finally rebuilding your life, would you trust peace enough to believe it couldn't be ripped away, or would you be ready to fight for it this time? Pandora's scream never fully formed. Marcus's grip was iron, fingers digging into her arm with the familiarity of ownership. The smell of his cologne, expensive, aggressive, flooded her senses, yanking her backward through time. Her body reacted before her mind did, muscles locking, breath stuttering, the old terror rising like a tide. "Let go of me," she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to steady it. Marcus laughed softly, low and cruel. "You don't get to disappear on me, Pandora. You think you can just run?" She twisted, trying to pull free, but he tightened his hold, dragging her toward a dark alley between buildings. Panic surged. "Help!" she cried. The sound echoed uselessly, swallowed by the city's indifference. Then the streetlights died. Not flickered, died. One by one, the lamps along the block went dark, plunging the street into unnatural shadow. The hum of the city seemed to fade, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against the ears. Marcus froze. "What the hell?" he muttered. Pandora felt it then. A shift in the air. Pressure. As if the night itself had drawn closer. A voice cut through the darkness, calm and cold. "Remove your hand." Marcus spun around. "Who the—" Lucas stepped into the dim glow spilling from a distant intersection, red shirt dark as spilled wine, black coat hanging from his shoulders like a shadow made solid. His eyes burned, not metaphorically, but literally, catching what little light remained and bending it. Pandora's breath caught. "Luca," she whispered, disbelief and relief crashing together. Marcus scoffed, regaining his bravado. "You know this guy?" Luca's gaze never left Marcus. "Release her." Marcus laughed again, harsher this time. "Or what? You'll call the cops." Lucas smiled. It was not a human smile. In one smooth motion, he crossed the distance between them, too fast. Impossibly fast. Marcus barely had time to gasp before Luca's hand closed around his wrist, forcing his fingers to open. Pandora stumbled backward, free. "Pandora," Lucas said gently, without looking at her. "Step away." She didn't hesitate. Marcus stared at his own arm, eyes wide. How did you?" Luca leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Marcus. "You touched what is under my protection." Marcus yanked his arm back, stumbling. "You're insane." "Yes," Luca agreed softly. "But not about this." Marcus lunged. He never landed the punch. Luca caught him mid-swing and slammed him against the brick wall with bone-jarring force. Marcus gasped, the air crushed from his lungs. Pandora screamed. "Stop!" Luca paused instantly. He turned to her, eyes still glowing faintly. "He won't die," he said calmly. "Unless you want him to." Her stomach flipped. I don't want him dead," she said, voice trembling. "I just want him gone." Luca nodded once. "As you wish." What followed was not a fight. It was a reckoning. Luca moved with terrifying precision, every strike controlled, every motion deliberate. He didn't rage. He didn't lose himself. He dismantled Marcus piece by piece, stripping away strength, confidence, cruelty. Marcus collapsed to the ground, sobbing now, bloodied but alive. "You don't own her," Lucas said, kneeling before him. "You never did." Marcus looked up, terror replacing arrogance. "What are you?" Lucas' eyes flared red. "Your consequence." Sirens wailed in the distance. Lucas straightened, stepping back. "Pandora," he said, "we need to leave." She nodded numbly, adrenaline flooding her system. They disappeared into the night just as police lights flooded the street. They didn't stop running until they reached the river. Pandora bent over, hands on her knees, gasping for breath. The city lights shimmered across the water, uncaring. Lucas stood a short distance away, watching her, making sure she was steady. Finally, she straightened and faced him. "You're not human," she said. "No, you're not a metaphor." "No." She swallowed. "You're a vampire." He inclined his head slightly. "Yes." Silence stretched between them. She laughed weakly. "Of course you are." He frowned. "You're not afraid?" "I should be," she said honestly. "But after tonight?" "After him." She shook her head. "You saved me." "I would never hurt you," Lucas said firmly. "I know," she replied. They sat on a bench overlooking the river, the night slowly returning to normal around them. After a while, Pandora spoke again. "All those times you said you choose who you become, this is what you meant." "Yes." She hugged herself. "I spent years thinking survival meant enduring pain quietly." Luca looked at her. And now, she said softly, "I think survival might mean refusing to be small." She turned to him. "What happens now?" "That depends," Luca replied. "On what you want." Pandora looked out over the water, thinking. "If you had the chance to face your abuser and walk away protected, would you choose fear? Or would you choose yourself?" She stood, shoulders squared. I want a life, she said. One that's mine. Lucas smiled, something like pride flickering across his ancient features. Then you'll have it. In the distance, sirens faded. For the first time, Marcus Hale lay broken, not just in body, but in power. And Pandora stood free. Freedom did not arrive gently. Pandora learned that in the days following the alleyway, it didn't feel like relief at first. It felt like aftermath, like standing in the wreckage after a storm, unsure which pieces of yourself were still usable. She stayed inside for 2 days straight. Luca didn't push. He stayed nearby, never inside her space, never looming. Sometimes she felt him more than saw him. The quiet certainty that if the door rattled or footsteps lingered too long in the hallway, she wouldn't be alone. On the third morning, she woke from a dreamless sleep and realized something startling. She wasn't afraid. Not numb. Not dissociated. Just calm. It scared her more than panic ever had. She made coffee, hands steady, and stood by the window watching New York wake up. Taxis honked. Someone shouted. Life continued. No sirens. No fists. No voice telling her who she was allowed to be. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He's in custody. Temporary restraining order issued. He won't be near you. Pandora stared at the screen, heart pounding. She typed back with deliberate slowness. Thank you. The reply came instantly. You did this. I just removed the obstacle. She smiled despite herself. They met that evening on the Brooklyn Bridge. The city glowed beneath them, lights scattered like constellations fallen to earth. Wind tugged at Pandora's coat, but she barely noticed. You didn't have to get involved with the police, she said as Luca joined her. I prefer redundancy, he replied. Immortality teaches you to plan ahead. She leaned against the railing. You make it sound very practical. It is, he said. Drama is inefficient. She laughed quietly. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was contemplative. After a while, Pandora spoke. What happens when people notice you don't age? They already have, Lucas said. A move. Change names. Build again. That sounds lonely. It can be. She glanced at him. Why stay in this world? He asked. She nodded. He thought for a long moment. Because occasionally, someone reminds me why I protect it. Her breath caught. Like me? She asked softly. Like you, he confirmed. She looked back out at the city, emotions tangling dangerously in her chest. You know this is complicated, she said. Yes. You're immortal. I'm very human. Yes. And I just escaped a marriage that nearly destroyed me. Yes, he said again, voice gentler now. She turned fully toward him. Then why are you still here? Luca met her gaze without flinching. Because you didn't break. You adapted. And now you're choosing yourself. That matters, to me. She swallowed. Luca, she said carefully, I don't want to be saved. I know, he replied immediately. That's why I stayed. Something inside her settled at that. The bookstore closed early that night. Pandora locked the door, the street unusually quiet. For the first time, she didn't scan shadows automatically. She walked home with her head up. Halfway down the block, she stopped. Lucas stood under a streetlight, red shirt vivid against the darkness. You're stalking me again, she said. I prefer escorting, he replied. She rolled her eyes. Walk me home, then. They moved side by side. Their pace matched easily. You ever miss being human? She asked suddenly. Luca considered the question seriously. I miss urgency, he said. The way everything mattered because time was limited. Doesn't it still matter? Yes, he said. But differently. Loss accumulates. She nodded. I know something about that. They reached her building. Pandora hesitated at the door. Do you want to come up? She asked. Lucas stilled. Not from hesitation, but from respect. Only if you're sure, he said. She met his eyes. I am. Inside her apartment, the lights were warm and soft. Pandora kicked off her shoes, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the space. They stood awkwardly for a moment. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Lucas smiled faintly. Neither do I. She laughed nervously. That's oddly comforting. They sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, conversation meandering from trivial to thoughtful. Music played quietly in the background. At some point, Pandora leaned closer without realizing it. So did Luca. Their hands brushed. She froze. He didn't move away, but he didn't press forward either. You can stop this, he said quietly. I don't want to, she replied. Then I'll follow your lead, he said. She reached for his hand deliberately this time. His skin was warm. Steady. Are you dangerous? she asked softly. Yes, Luca answered honestly. She smiled. Good. I'm done with men who hide it. He laughed softly, surprised. Their first kiss was slow, tentative. Not consuming. Not desperate. Just real. Pandora pulled back, breathless. That was nice. Nice. Luca repeated, amused. She shrugged. I like nice. They sat there afterward, fingers intertwined. I don't want forever promises, Pandora said quietly. I don't even know who I am yet. I'm not asking for forever, Luca replied. I'm asking for now. She nodded. I can do now. Later that night, as Luca stood on the rooftop outside her building, watching the city, his phone buzzed again. Another message from his network. Hale has been released on bail. He's angry. He's reckless. Luca's jaw tightened. Pandora had chosen herself. Now the world would have to learn to respect that choice. If someone tried to take her freedom again, they would not survive the lesson. Below, Pandora slept peacefully for the first time in years. And above her, a vampire kept watch, not as a savior, but as a witness to her becoming. If freedom feels unfamiliar after trauma, does that mean you're lost? Or does it mean you're finally somewhere new? Marcus Hale had never felt powerless before. Even sitting in the back seat of a rideshare, jaw clenched, fingers digging into his knee, he still believed the world would eventually bend back into shape. It always had. Judges listened. People doubted victims. Pandora had been quiet for years. Why would that change now? Because of him. Marcus replayed the alley over and over in his mind. The speed, the strength, the eyes. That wasn't human. And Marcus Hale did not forgive fear easily. Pandora woke before sunrise. It wasn't panic that pulled her from sleep this time. It was instinct. The old vigilance hadn't vanished. It had transformed. She sat up slowly, listening. The apartment was quiet. Safe. For now. She brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching the city blush into morning. Her reflection in the glass looked different. Still soft. Still scarred. But no longer shrinking. She thought of Luca, not as a protector, as a presence. Someone who didn't rush her healing or define it for her. Someone who didn't demand gratitude in exchange for safety. Her phone buzzed. Walk with me? Luca. She smiled and replied yes. They met at a riverside path just as the sun crested the skyline. Luca wore black as always, red scarf loose at his throat. He looked impossibly composed, as if centuries had taught him patience that bordered on stillness. You don't sleep, she said, falling into step beside him. I rest, he replied. You? Better than before. That's progress. They walked in silence for a while. Marcus is out on bail, Luca said eventually. Pandora didn't stop walking, but her shoulders stiffened. I figured. He's angry. I know. He's unpredictable. She finally turned to him. And I'm done running. Luca studied her carefully. That answer has consequences. So did staying, she replied. A hint of pride flickered across his face. What do you want to do? I want to live like he doesn't exist, Pandora said. And if he tries to change that, I'll deal with it. Luca nodded slowly. Then I'll follow your rules. That mattered more than she could explain. Marcus didn't go to Pandora's apartment. He went to her workplace. The bookstore was quiet in the afternoon lull, the bell chiming softly as he stepped inside. Pandora looked up from the counter and froze. Time slowed. Her heart thundered, but her feet didn't move. She didn't flinch. Marcus smiled thinly. Hello, sweetheart. Leave, she said. You don't get to talk to me like that. I do now, she replied, voice steady. You're not welcome here. The owner appeared behind Pandora, tension immediate. Is there a problem? Marcus's smile widened. Just a misunderstanding. Pandora met his eyes. I have a restraining order. The smile faltered. You wouldn't, he hissed quietly. I already did, she said. For a moment, Marcus looked genuinely shocked. Then furious. He leaned closer, voice dropping. You think that thing you're hiding behind will protect you forever? Pandora didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because Marcus suddenly stiffened, color draining from his face. Luca stood in the doorway. Not touching. Not threatening. Just present. Marcus backed away instinctively. You. Luca tilted his head slightly. You should leave. The bookstore owner cleared her throat. Sir. Marcus turned and stormed out. Pandora exhaled shakily. You okay? Luca asked. She nodded. I think so. You handled that well. She smiled faintly. I didn't shrink. No, Luca agreed. You stood. That night, Pandora sat alone on her fire escape, city air cool against her skin. She replayed the encounter, adrenaline still buzzing faintly. She hadn't been rescued. She had been supported. The difference mattered. Luca joined her quietly, handing her a mug of tea. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I want to," he replied. They sat side by side, knees almost touching. "Do you ever regret interfering?" she asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation. She looked at him, surprised. "Because interference creates attachment," he continued. "And attachment creates loss. Yet you still do it." "Sometimes," he said, "loss is preferable to regret." She leaned her head against his shoulder. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he rested his cheek lightly against her hair. Marcus made his decision that same night. If the law wouldn't give him control back, he would take it. He loaded a gun. Pandora woke to a pounding at her door. She glanced at the clock. Past midnight. Her heart spiked. "Pandora," Marcus's voice called. "Open the door." Her breath caught, but she didn't scream. She grabbed her phone, fingers shaking, and texted one word. "Luca." The reply came instantly. "Don't move." The pounding intensified. "You think you can hide from me?" Marcus shouted. "You owe me." The hallway lights flickered. The air shifted. Pandora stepped back from the door as the lock shattered inward. Marcus burst inside, wild-eyed, gun raised. And Luca was suddenly there. Between heartbeats. He caught Marcus's wrist and twisted. The gun clattered to the floor. Pandora screamed this time. Luca slammed Marcus against the wall, fangs bared, eyes blazing red. "This ends," Luca said softly. Pandora forced herself to speak. "Luca." He froze. She stepped forward, voice shaking but firm. "Don't kill him. Not for me." Luca's jaw clenched. Slowly, painfully, he released Marcus, who collapsed sobbing to the floor. Sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors had called. Luca turned to Pandora, eyes returning to normal. "You chose mercy," he said. "I chose myself," she replied. Marcus was arrested that night. This time, there was no bail. As dawn broke, Pandora stood at her window, watching police lights fade. She felt lighter than she ever had. Not because the danger was gone, but because she had faced it. If healing means reclaiming your voice in the presence of fear, how do you think your life would change once you finally spoke? The aftermath did not explode the way Pandora once imagined it would. There were no dramatic news headlines splashed across screens, no crowds whispering her name, no instant sense of triumph. Instead, there were forms, statements, long hours sitting in a quiet police interview room with bad coffee and worse lighting, answering the same questions over and over again. And through it all, Lucas stayed close, but never close enough to overshadow her. He didn't speak unless asked, didn't correct her words, didn't look at Marcus once when they passed him in handcuffs, face slack with defeat. Pandora noticed that. How Lucas' power never demanded attention. How he seemed to understand that this moment wasn't about him. It was about her telling the truth out loud and surviving it. When it was over, the detective, a tired woman with kind eyes, looked at Pandora and said, "You did the right thing." Pandora nodded, surprised by how much she needed to hear that. Life resumed, slowly. The restraining order became permanent. Marcus's charges multiplied. The investigation unearthed more than Pandora had ever known. Financial manipulation, past reports from women who'd never followed through, patterns that made her stomach turn. It was horrible and validating. Some nights, Pandora cried not from pain but from anger, for the woman she had been, for the silence she'd carried, for the time she could never get back. Other nights, she slept deeply, dreamlessly, as if her body finally believed it was allowed to rest. Luca remained a constant. He helped her move into a new apartment, brighter, higher, filled with windows and plants. He carried boxes like they weighed nothing, smiling faintly when she noticed. "You're cheating," she said. "Undeniably," he replied. She laughed, the sound easy now. They cooked together, walked together, talked late into the night about everything and nothing. Sometimes about his past, fragments, carefully chosen. Ancient cities, lost empires, names he no longer used. Sometimes about her future. "I don't know who I'm becoming," Pandora admitted one evening, sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by unpacked books. "That's not a flaw," Lucas said. "That's a beginning." She looked at him. "You're very good at saying the right thing. I've had centuries of practice saying the wrong ones first." She smiled softly. The vampire world did not ignore Pandora. She felt it one night while walking home alone, eyes on her that didn't belong to humans. The air tightened, shadows stretching just a bit too far. Luca sensed it too. They know about you, he said later, voice carefully neutral. About me? She asked. Why? Because you matter to me. The weight of that settled heavily between them. Is that dangerous? She asked. Yes, Luca said honestly. Then why tell me? Because you deserve to choose. Pandora absorbed that quietly. What does it mean? She asked. It means my world has rules, he said. And not all of them approve of my attachments. Attachments, she echoed, amused despite the tension. You, he clarified. She met his gaze. I won't be a weakness. You're not, he said firmly. You're a catalyst. That word sent a shiver through her. The confrontation came sooner than expected. They were at a rooftop bar. Pandora laughing, wine glass in hand, feeling something close to joy, when Luca went still. What is it? She asked. We have company, he replied quietly. 3 figures stood at the edge of the rooftop, elegant and unnervingly still. Pale, beautiful, dangerous. One stepped forward, a woman with silver hair and eyes like cut glass. So this is her, she said coolly. The human. Pandora's spine straightened. Yes, Lucas said. This is Pandora. The woman smiled thinly. You're playing a risky game, Luca. I'm done playing games, he replied. You've broken covenant, another vampire said. Interfered. Protected. Claimed. I have not claimed her, Lucas snapped. Pandora glanced at him sharply. Not yet, the silver-haired woman said. But you will. Pandora took a breath and stepped forward. I don't know your rules, she said, voice steady. But I'm not a prize or a liability. I'm a person. The vampires regarded her with interest now. Brave, the woman mused. Fragile. Pandora smiled tightly. You'd be surprised. Luca watched her like something precious and terrifying all at once. Enough, he said. If you have a problem with my choices, take it up with me. The silver-haired vampire studied Pandora one last time. We will. They vanished as silently as they'd arrived. Pandora exhaled shakily. Well, that was intense. Luca laughed softly. You handled that better than some immortals. She leaned against him. You didn't tell me they'd look like supermodels. Eternity encourages vanity. Later that night, Pandora sat on her bed, heart still racing. This isn't just my world anymore, is it? She asked quietly. No, Lucas said. But it's still your choice how close you come to mine. She looked up at him. And if I don't want to walk away? He searched her face. Then I will protect you. Not as a savior, she said. No, he agreed. As a partner. The word lingered between them. Luca, she said softly. I'm not afraid of monsters anymore. His eyes darkened. You should be. She smiled. Only of the ones who pretend they're harmless. He laughed quietly. They kissed then. Deeper, surer. Not desperate. Chosen. Weeks later, Pandora received the final notice. Marcus Hale had pled guilty. No appeals. No parole. It was over. She stood in the courthouse steps, paper trembling in her hands, sunlight warming her face. Luca waited nearby. She walked to him slowly, then stopped. It's really finished, she said. Yes. She laughed breathlessly, then cried, then laughed again. Luca wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she let go of the last of it. You survived, he said against her hair. I did more than that, she replied. I lived. As they walked away together, Pandora realized something profound. She hadn't been saved by a vampire. She had saved herself, and chosen love without fear. If the past no longer has power over you, what kind of future would you dare to build? The future arrived quietly, not with thunder or blood or ancient ceremonies whispered in dead languages, but with morning lights spilling across Pandora's kitchen floor and the smell of coffee she'd learned to make strong enough for a vampire. She stood barefoot by the window of her new life, watching the city wake up below. Traffic hummed. People hurried. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly at nothing important. For the first time in years, Pandora felt ordinary and extraordinary. Luca leaned against the doorway, dressed in black slacks and a deep red sweater that clung just enough to remind her that some fantasies were real. His dark hair was still damp from the shower, eyes warm, watching her with an expression that still startled her sometimes, like he was afraid she might disappear. You're staring again, she said without turning. I'm appreciating, he replied smoothly. She smiled. Same thing, she said. They had chosen California. Not because it was glamorous, though it was, but because the sun felt like defiance. Because the ocean reminded Pandora that things could crash endlessly and still remain beautiful. Because Luca, for all his centuries, had never lived anywhere that demanded so much light. Their house sat on a quiet hill, modern glass and steel wrapped around warmth. It was theirs, not hidden, not borrowed, not stolen from another life. Chosen. Pandora had gone back to school. Psychology. Trauma counseling. I want to help women like me, she told Luca one night. He hadn't questioned it, had only nodded and said, they'll survive because you did. She volunteered at shelters, spoke when she was ready, stayed silent when she wasn't. She learned that healing wasn't linear, and that strength wasn't loud. Sometimes it was just staying. The vampire council did not disappear. They watched, tested, waited, but Luca stood unshaken. When summoned, he went alone. When questioned, he answered plainly. She is not human weakness, he told them. She is human truth. Some laughed, some scoffed, some listened. Change, even among immortals, was slow, but it was inevitable. And Luca had always been patient. Pandora learned the rhythms of his world. The nights when he needed to feed, never from her, never without consent, never without care. The centuries-old etiquette, the quiet danger, the beauty. She was offered immortality once, not as a demand, as a choice. They sat together on the cliff overlooking the ocean, stars scattered like secrets. You don't have to decide, Luca said gently. Not now, not ever. She considered it seriously. Eternity, power, staying forever beside the man she loved. Then she shook her head. Not yet, she said. I've only just learned how precious time is. Luca smiled, eyes shining with something dangerously close to awe. Then I'll cherish every second you give me. She kissed him. Salt air, warm skin, trust. The final echo of Marcus faded completely 1 year later. Pandora stood in a packed auditorium, microphone trembling slightly in her hand. She hadn't planned on speaking, had only come to listen. But when a woman on stage broke down, voice cracking as she described the first night she tried to leave and failed, Pandora stood. She told her story, not with rage, not with fear, with clarity, with truth, with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the ending didn't define the beginning. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was reverent. Later, outside, Luca wrapped his coat around her shoulders. You were incredible, he said. I was honest, she replied. That's new for me. He smiled. You wear it well. Years passed. Pandora's laughter grew louder. Her scars faded but never vanished, and she stopped wishing they would. Luca grew more human. He joked more, slept more, let the sun touch him longer than vampires usually dared. They traveled, loved fiercely, argued occasionally, made up passionately. They were not perfect. They were real. One evening, Luca took her back to the place where it all began. An airport. They sat side by side at the gate, hands entwined. Do you ever think about that flight? Pandora asked. All the time, Luca admitted. It changed everything. She smiled. I thought you were a fashion vampire. I am, he said seriously. This is a recognized subtype. She laughed, leaning into him. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For not saving me, she said. For standing beside me while I saved myself. Luca pressed a kiss to her temple. You were never broken. You were becoming. The proposal came quietly. No crowd. No spectacle. Just Luca kneeling in their living room, holding a ring crafted from obsidian and silver, ancient and modern, like them. Pandora, he said, voice steady despite everything he was. Will you choose me? Again and again, as long as your time allows. She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. I choose you. They married at dusk, overlooking the sea. Humans and vampires alike attended. There was no fear, only love. Pandora sometimes thought about the woman she used to be, the one who believed love hurt. She wished she could go back and whisper to her. It doesn't have to. But maybe that woman needed the pain to recognize the peace. Pandora stood now in her kitchen again, older, wiser, still soft, but unbreakable. Luca wrapped his arms around her from behind. Penny for your thoughts, he murmured. She smiled. I was thinking, she said, if that plane had been full if I'd sat somewhere else. Luca kissed her neck. You would have survived anyway, he said. I was just lucky enough to witness it. She turned in his arms, eyes bright. And I was lucky enough to meet a vampire in red and black who taught me love doesn't have to bleed. Outside, the city glowed. Inside, their future waited. And Pandora knew, without fear, without doubt, escaping was only the beginning. Choosing herself was the victory. And love? Love was the reward. If Pandora's journey resonated with you, ask yourself, what would you choose if fear no longer held you back? Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.